What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to talk about some erratas, some nerfs. You see, ladies and gentlemen, Keyforge have gone and nerfed the two best cards from Call of the Archons. And when I say nerfed, I mean really nerfed, really made these cards significantly less powerful than they were. And when I say the two best cards, I'm talking about bait and switch, and I'm talking about library access. And I'm not being over the top here, and I'm not trying to bamboozle you into thinking this is bigger news than it is. I will link my top 10 cards from Call of the Archons in the description. And my numbers 1 and 2 were bait and switch and library access. They were literally the top 2 cards in Call of the Archons, and my list was made of a lot of community involvement. I did a bunch of polls and everything. And they are both a lot less powerful than they were when you guys woke up this morning. So let's have a look, shall we? Although, quick heads up, what I will do is I'll pop a timestamp in the description, so if you want to flick to a particular ruling, you can. So let's start off with library access. Library access looks like and is one of the most powerful cards in the entire game. When you play library access, it basically sets off a chain whereby, for the rest of the turn, every time you play a card, you draw a card. So the ideal situation for library access is that you play this when you've got a handful of logos cards, and then you can just keep drawing cards for the rest of the game. And then, of course, you want to be trying to combine this with stuff like Wild Wormhole. Play the top card of your deck, so you play Wild Wormhole, draw a card. Play the top card of your deck, draw a card. And Phase Shift, whereby you play it to draw a card, but then you can play a non-logos card, so you draw another card. It's great. And then, of course, you can cycle it, because it ends up in your discard pile. And then, if you run out of your discard pile, you shuffle your discard pile, it becomes your deck. If you draw it again, you play it again, and then you're drawing 2 cards every single time you play any card, or 3 or 4, etc. Now, the big change with library access: when you play it, it gets purged. The new reading is this: play. For the remainder of the turn, each time you play another card, draw a card. Purge library access. So what I just told you about every time you play a card, you draw one, and then you get it in your discard pile, run out of your deck, shuffle your discard pile, get it out again and draw 2, that can no longer happen. You still draw a card every time you play a card, but now it is limited to once. You may draw 1 card every time you play a card, but no matter how many cards you draw, you will never get that library access back. It is gone, ladies and gentlemen. Purged, incidentally, means removed from the game. It means it ain't coming back. So why was this change necessary? Now, I've got a deck, as I've mentioned in a couple of videos, with library access and free Phase Shift. It's a very good deck, it's a very fast deck, it's a very consistent deck, it's got some fun combos, but that's not the kind of deck that causes it to be banned. The real combo we hate here is Nepenthe Seed. Because Nepenthe Seed has an Omni ability, meaning even though it's an untamed card, you can use it on any turn. You sacrifice it and return a card from your discard pile to your hand. So what you do is you play library access, and then it ends up in your discard pile, and then you immediately sacrifice Nepenthe Seed to grab it out and play it again. So before you've even started, you're drawing 2 cards every time you play a card. And then, of course, you're way more likely to run out of cards in your deck, so you're way more likely to actually end up cycling your deck and getting 3, 4, 5 cards going. We haven't seen that many Vault Tours so far, but the Illinois Vault Tour was won by the lovely George Kegel, who was playing a library access Nepenthe Seed deck. And then, of course, George's deck had Phase Shift. You kind of need Phase Shift to really make the most of the library access Nepenthe Seed combo, so you're not just restricted to logos cards. And then he had stuff like Restoring Guntus to try and control which house your opponent chose, and in fact, Control the Weak, which did a much better job of controlling which house their opponent chose. And he had stuff like Twin Bolt Emission, which would do damage and clear his opponent's board. And essentially, what George's deck did was set off the Library Access Nepenthe Seed combo, draw through his entire deck, so he essentially could spend as long as he wanted on his turn, replaying as many cards as he wanted, and by the end of the turn, he would have locked his opponent into whichever house couldn't disrupt him. He would have a ridiculous amount of Ember, literally as many as he wanted. He would have used Twin Bolt Emission to completely clear all the creatures off his opponent's board, and he'd just be sitting there ready to forge free keys and win. But there are some even more egregious examples of this we've seen, using cards like Key Charge and Key Abduction, because both of those cards allow for mid-turn forging. Key Abduction allows you to return each Mars creature to its owner's hand, and then forge a key at +9 current cost, reduced by 1 for each card in your hand. So what you essentially do is get a whole bunch of Ember by just playing all of your cards and getting all of the Ember bonuses for as many times as you like, and then use Phase Shift to play Key Abduction to forge a key, and a lot of the time you'll actually have so many cards in hand you don't even need that much Ember, you can be kind of forging it for free. And because you're using Library Access to just draw through your entire deck, you play Key Abduction, redraw it, play Key Abduction, redraw it, play Key Abduction, your opponent never even gets to win. Key Charge is a very similar thing, except instead of cards in hand, you really do need the Ember, but you need 7 Ember for each key. And all you need is a couple of cards with Ember bonuses, you just play them on a loop, Twin Bolt Emission has an Ember bonus, and then you can essentially just get as many Ember as you like, and then Phase Shift into Key Charge 3 times to win the game. Did we need this errata? There are some decks out there that are truly broken. You really need Library Access Nepenthe Seed Phase Shift as a minimum to really take advantage of this combo. You don't need anything else, but you need either kind of the Control the Weak Twin Bolt Emission combo, so that you can stop your opponent disrupting you by choosing a house they can't disrupt you with, while also clearing their board, or you need something like Key Charge or Key Abduction. There aren't that many decks that can take advantage of it, but there are enough. What about decks like mine, that don't have that one-turn win potential, but are still just good? Library Access was always a good card, verging on broken in some decks and broken in others. I can see why they did this, though it is only, I believe, a small number of decks that really necessitated this change. The other change we have is Bait and Switch. Now, Bait and Switch is a phenomenal card, which has been popping up in almost every winning deck we've seen. It's been ridiculous. And Bait and Switch reads, if your opponent has more Ember than you, steal 1. Repeat this card's effect if your opponent still has more Ember than you. Now, this isn't actually getting an errata per se, although technically it is an errata, but more, this card is really just doing what it should have done in the first place. We've essentially all been reading it wrong. The new wording is, if your opponent has more Ember than you, steal 1. Repeat the preceding effect if your opponent still has more Ember than you. What it means is, you only repeat once. So we've been playing it, and it's properly so, ruled in tournaments and all of that, that you keep going until either you have the same number of Ember, or you actually end up with 1 more than your opponent. So if there's 13 Ember on the field in total, and you've got fewer than your opponent, you end up with 7, they end up with 6. But if there's 10 on the field, you get 5 and they get 5. What this has changed to is you can steal a maximum of 2 Ember. You steal 2 Ember, and that's it. That's all you get. If your opponent's got 20 Ember and you've got 2, you steal 2 Ember. If they've got more than you, you steal the first. If they've still got more than you, you steal the second. And that's it. It's intended to be, you steal a couple of Ember. This has turned it from, oh my goodness, that's amazing, this is a kind of comeback card that's going to allow me to make big swings in the mid-game, early game, or late game, to, oh, that's kind of nice, I get to steal a couple of Ember. This makes a gigantic difference, ladies and gentlemen. Because it used to be that if you were playing Bait and Switch, you would always know that you could let your opponent rush Ember, and as long as you didn't have a huge amount of Ember, you could even things up and take advantage. If you knew your opponent had Bait and Switch, and remember that in the Archon format where you take your best deck, you do get to look at your opponent's deck list, and you'll know if they're playing Bait and Switch, you would play in such a way as you would try and control your Ember until your opponent played Bait and Switch, and then when you were sure they couldn't reuse it, you'd go for it. This is literally going to change the way that people play decks. This is going to change the way we play if we've got bait and switch or not got bait and switch in our deck. This might even make people throw away some of their decks, not literally, figuratively. But these Shadows decks with bait and switch are not going to be as good as they were. They might still be good, but something like Routine Job is now probably better at stealing Ember, depending on how many you've got in the deck. It lets you steal an Ember and then steal another Ember for each copy of Routine Job in your discard pile. It means Too Much to Protect has become over the top good and significantly better than bait and switch. Too Much to Protect, steal all but 6 of your opponent's Ember. Now, you got to steal 1 more to stop them forging, but now if I'm looking at a deck list, I want to see Too Much to Protect way more than I want to see bait and switch, and it's not even close. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't make bait and switch a bad card. You're still stealing 2 Ember, and you got a whole bunch of cards out there like Urchin, like Relentless Whispers that only steal 1. But it's turned it from an, oh my goodness, that's amazing, it's probably the best card in the set, to, oh, you get to steal a couple of Ember, that's nice. It's a phenomenal change, and people are now going to have to go back to their Shadows decks and reevaluate them in the light of this card is not as good. My prediction, and it is only a prediction though I feel good about it, people are going to stop searching for bait and switch decks and start searching instead for Too Much to Protect decks. But if we go back to library access, one of the money decks, one of the sought after decks has been library access and the Nepenthe Seed, and I still think you need a copy of Phase Shift in there. People used to pay big money for those decks, and they won't anymore. That's just gone. It was a deck that revolved around looping your entire deck that can no longer loop your entire deck. Make no mistake about it, these are big changes. Huge changes. Literally, the 2 best cards in Call of the Archons have been significantly nerfed to make them a lot worse. I still think Library Access is a great card. You can't cycle it anymore, and that's sad, but that really means people are going to not keep it in their hand for so long, because you used to try and stash it until you could get through the rest of your deck, so that you could try and begin the cycle so you could double it up, or at least hope to double it up. But bait and switch, people are now going to be in situations where if bait and switch worked like it used to, you could get right back in the game, stop them forging, etc., and you won't be able to now. These are big changes. I'm right on the eve of the Vault Tour, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a little bit excited. But this is one of those videos where we really need to have a look in the comment section. So go nuts, ladies and gentlemen. Be nice. Tell me what you think about these 2 rulings. I am very excited to hear. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at the Wossy, where we talk about Keyforge and a whole bunch of other games. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.